I want you all to look at this number, 7, and remember it. Do you know what this number represents? This is the number of days in the last 5 years where the air quality index of Pakistan was within the WHO's limits or standards, and we were only able to do this for 7 days. And this certainly changes one's perspective about climate change, about energy, about carbon. And instantly, the issue of climate change that mostly resides on the fringes, on the sidelines, it takes the center stage. And even recently, when we look around us, you know what's happening? Floods, rains, erratic, irregular weather patterns, actual loss of life has also incurred because of this very climate change. But we are late getting serious about it. On the other hand, talking specifically about Pakistan, we also see that our share of emissions in the global emissions is less than 1%, or as you can see, it has already started to go downwards as well. And for me, and I hope for you as well, at times I ask the question that why then we are suffering from such catastrophes? Why then we are suffering from such losses amounting to 40, 50 billion dollars? And this is where I believe our understanding of the climate comes to the center. I truly believe that the way we are understanding the issue of climate change or energy is not capturing its whole entirety. It is not capturing its complexity and its importance as it should. And that is the message here I want to convey. And even if one person in the audience is able to take this lens down and adopt a new one to look at the issue of climate change, I think my job here would be done. And when we think about climate, it's all about reframing the narrative. The narrative we have around climate change, narrative tends to be a very important thing. We actually at times undermine its importance. And the main issue is, how do we define the problem? It's said that a problem well defined is a problem half solved. So I personally believe, and I'll share this with you as well, that we have not been able to define the problem of climate change in a proper manner. We have not been successful in that. Hence, the solutions coming afterwards are also not practical or pragmatic. This is a very important thing. And in this very, very brief talk, we are going to embark on sort of a journey where you will unlearn and relearn. We're going to make some stops at some milestones. Of course, it's going to be very brief, but I would want you to go on and explore those topics afterwards as well. Let's start with what is the narrative right now. I think you all might have heard or read one phrase or term, energy transition, in the newspaper, or in your essays, or in your books. What if I tell you that this whole term, as it has been defined, is the first step in the problem? Transition, singular. It means what it means. In simple words, it means that we should move from fossil fuels to renewable energy systems. And then we will live happily ever after. But turns out the reality is far complex than this. There is a very interesting research about this that shows that transition is singular. Instead, we should use the word transitions. Why? You might ask, what would a single S do in this regard? If you add the S, it means that you are acknowledging that there are different pathways for countries to embark on this journey of net zero. For Pakistan, for instance, take a look at this chart. There are some developed countries, advanced economies, then there is Pakistan. This is showing energy use per person. And now I ask you a very simple question, that should the solutions for the countries at the top be the same for the countries at the bottom? There is a sea of difference, or in technical terms, an order of magnitude of difference between both energy consumption on a personal level. I think logic would dictate that no, the solutions should not be the same. And this is what adding a single S does to this whole scenario. Acknowledging that there are different pathways through which countries like Pakistan, maybe we will take a little bit longer than other countries, the developing countries, the advanced countries, to move towards renewable. We will, but the timeline is different. The way is different. Our social, historic, topographic, and other features are different. That is the first point. That is the start where I think we all should rethink our approach towards climate. Another related point to energy transition. What if I tell you that there is no energy transition? In the past 250 years, there has been no energy resource that has been replaced. You might have heard of the term age of oil, age of coal, age of wood. But as you can see, even right now, a company engaged in the business of oil would use more charcoal than the whole French industry did at its peak back in 1960s. By 1950s, right after the advent of oil, the US still used 1.4 million barrels of wood to transport oil. Right now, coal, the dirtiest of all fuels, as it is said. Do you think the consumption of coal has dropped? You would be surprised to learn that right now, after all the COPs, after all the legislation and our promises, the consumption of coal is at its highest point in history. So where is the energy transition? It is always energy addition. You can see it here as well, where you can see from 1800s, starting from the traditional biomass, up until now, there has been layers, energy transition, energy layering. It has happened in a layer. All of the energy resources have been used. They will still be used. And this makes me segue and lead into the next point that is very important. That is the idea of energy basket. You know what this idea essentially enshrines or encompasses? You might have been aware of this fact where different energy resources have been demonized, have been criticized for their role in the environment. That is good. But is it okay to just clearly and all of a sudden let them go? Absolutely not. Take the example of Pakistan. There is scientifically, there is still a direct correlation between carbon emissions or use of energy and GDP growth. So if someone is to say to us like, let's stop using fossil fuels all of a sudden, it means that we are letting go of all the development ladder, of all the improvements in standards of living. And I think that is not possible, and none of you here would agree with it. So what is the solution? Energy basket. Energy basket assumes, for instance, as you can see, there is a dial. The dial can go from 100% fossil fuels to 100% renewable energy mix. And for those in the audience who have a technical background as well, you can imagine how critical base load management is to the survival of the people. Please look at the 2019 polar vortex that happened in the US. So for the base load, when there is a shock to the grid, even in Pakistan during summers, solar or wind or other renewable energy resources would not be able to take the brunt when everyone in their homes are using air conditioners to cool down. These are stark realities that we all need to acknowledge and ask ourselves whether we are on the right direction. So this is the third stop. This is the third milestone that I think we all should make towards our journey to reframe the narrative around energy transitions. And this finally also speaks about the energy security for a country, for national security. The biggest component is energy security. And this also addresses that. And this is highly, highly relevant for countries like Pakistan. And this needs to be propagated, promoted more. Another very important point, and it's very surprising that not many researches have been done on this, or it's not in the mainstream. You all have heard about how electricity is now being created by the use of renewables, right? It is very good. Electricity now runs most of the businesses and even cars right now, electric vehicles. But what we fail to acknowledge is the fact that electricity is only 19% of the final energy consumption of the world. What does it mean? For instance, if all the electricity of the world was created using renewable energy, there still would be 81% of the energy consumption that would still depend upon fossil fuels. Let me give you an example. There are 6,000 plus byproducts of oil, 6,000 plus. From medicinal use to homes, it is used everywhere. Cement, steel, plastics, ammonia, what has been called the 4 pillars of civilization. Pakistan needs around 12 to 15 million housing units in the next few years. How are we going to make that? Using cement. People will buy more AC units, people will buy more cars. If the standard of living increased, the number of household units also increased. So what are the alternatives for this? We cannot just pat ourselves on the back if we have made electricity through renewables. That is like missing out 80% of the equation. This is why I believe it is very important for us to not look at these rosy outlooks and these predictions just as is. You should take them with a pinch of salt. Like, I don't know, maybe there is more to it. There is 80%. The next point in this journey, probably the final point of this journey, is technology. We all have pinned a lot of hopes on technology. Technology is going to be the savior. We know that. Hydrogen economy, direct air capture. Pakistan has also installed one of those systems. I happen to have the honor to visit as well. Carbon capture and storage systems. These are systems that assumingly sucks the carbon out of the atmosphere, hence preserving the integrity of the biosphere, assumingly. Now, depending upon technology is not a bad thing. Actually, technology is one of the key factors that will usher us in the era of green energy, green growth. But what is problematic is only to rely on technology, because we cannot justify doing business as usual and say that technology is going to help us save us. Have a look at this chart. Very simple. On the right side, you see that the vertical line, this is the carbon emissions. Starting from 1960s and even going back, carbon emissions have only increased. And this is a point I've always reiterate. Despite all the efforts, despite 29 COPs, the 30th one is going to be held this year. Why is this the case? You look at the red line here. Do you know what the red line represents? It represents the amount of carbon that was captured by those systems that I told you about. And the red line on the left side, you see it's written 0. What it means in simple terms, like there is a sea of difference once again between the carbon that we emitted and the carbon that was captured by these systems. A lot of investment, trillions of dollars of investment is actually going into biofuels. You might have heard of the name biofuels. According to one estimate, if we are to produce the world's energy, 1/5 of it only, 1/5, via biofuels, we will need to consume every blade of grass, every green meadow, and all the crops in the world. And that will only meet only 1/5 of the global energy needs. What it means, it should not mean that we should stop working on technology. It means that we should realize that climate is a complex problem. It would involve multiple steps for us to get it right. There cannot be one solution to it, not one factor. And you must be thinking right now, like, then what is going to happen? What is the case? Look at this chart. 87% of the global energy mix is still fossil fuels. This is the latest figure, 87%. Now, what can we do? I mean, of course, we should not feel helpless about it, or we should not feel unfortunate about it that we cannot do anything. The solution is within us. To understand that, we need to realize that there is more to climate than deforestation, glaciers melting, or patrons of rain or floods. It's about the social life. It's about how we live, how we consume, what we consume, how much we consume. It all boils down to choices, the choices we make every day. Take, for instance, the fact that manufacturing a new phone has more carbon footprint than charging your current phone for the next 10 years every day. Next time when you go and buy a cotton shirt, know that it uses same amount of water that a person would drink in 2.5 years. When you buy a new pair of jeans, you should realize that it uses the same amount of water to fill 50 bathtubs. Another thing, of all the plastics that has been made up until now, since its invention, of all the plastics, more than 50% was made in the last 20 years. This speaks a lot about what choices are we making, where are we headed to. And I think the solution to climate change then comes down to us, each individual, especially the youngsters, the researchers, the industrialists. What sort of practices you are using, what sort of materials you are using, and above all, what sort of research are we doing? Is our research capturing this core? And once again, let me say this once again, for countries like Pakistan, this is a matter of life and death. Even if we think here like, okay, climate change impacts or affects certain people, not us, it does. When the bill of electricity, your electricity bill increases, which I'm sure has, that is because of climate change. When we don't have enough gas to meet the demand, that is because of climate change. Something that used to come only in hundreds is now coming, the bill is coming into thousands now. This is all climate change. So once again, the final message here is energy transitions, not energy transition. We need to embrace path-dependent approach. Maybe there are no energy transition, there is energy addition, and we need to work with this as a matter of policy, as a matter of research. And finally, let's not only rely on technology. Let's work together and create a path, sustainable path, where each one of you and we are involved in that. It is only after we realize the true extent of this whole issue that we will be able to come up with practical solutions. Otherwise, I've shown you the carbon emissions will continue to increase if we continue to do business as usual. I hope that after this talk, you will embark on this journey where you will start to look at climate change from a different lens. The lens that you were wearing up until now needs to be thrown away, and you need to come up with a new lens. Thank you so much.